Nef, don't get jealous. I just want us all to have a nice New Year dinner, my wife Elena said after she showed up to our romantic reservation with her ex-boyfriend Alex Sterling trailing behind her like some designer-suited shadow. I'm Jack Landon, and I run a small boxing gym in downtown Portland, Maine. Not the glamorous life Elena had dreamed of when we got married 5 years ago, but it paid the bills and kept me grounded. What I didn't expect was to spend New Year's Eve watching my wife practically climb into another man's lap at the city's most expensive steakhouse. The whole evening had started innocently enough. I'd made reservations at Morrison's, the kind of place where they fold your napkin when you go to the bathroom and the wine list costs more than most people's rent. Elena had been distant for weeks, always on her phone, always working late at her tech PR firm. I thought a romantic dinner might bring us back together. When I arrived at 7 sharp, Elena was already there. Standing next to her was Alex Sterling, her college boyfriend who'd somehow wormed his way back into our lives 6 months ago under the guise of being just friends. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly gym rent, his perfectly styled hair catching the restaurant's ambient lighting like he was posing for a magazine cover. "What's going on?" I asked, looking between them. "Why are there 3 of us when it should be 2? Elena smoothed down her black dress, the one I'd bought her for our anniversary, and gave me that patronizing smile she'd perfected over the past year. "Jack, don't be jealous. I just thought it would be nice if we could all spend the evening together. Alex doesn't have anywhere to go tonight." The maitre d' looked confused, glancing at his reservation book. "Mr. Landon, your table is set for 2. "Make it 3, Elena said before I could respond, slipping the man a folded bill. "We'll make it work." And just like that, my romantic New Year's dinner became a threesome I never asked for. Alex extended his hand with that smug smile he'd worn since college. "Jack, thanks for including me, man. Really appreciate it." I shook his hand, feeling the soft palm of someone who'd never worked a day of manual labor in his life. "Sure thing, Alex. Wouldn't want you to be alone on New Year's." The hostess led us to a corner table with a view of the harbor. Elena immediately sat next to Alex, leaving me across from them like I was the third wheel at my own dinner. Throughout the appetizer course, I watched her lean into him, touching his arm when she laughed, sharing bites of her food with him while barely acknowledging my presence. "Remember that time in college when we snuck into the dean's office?" Elena giggled, her hand resting on Alex's forearm. "How could I forget? You were so nervous you were shaking," Alex replied, covering her hand with his. I cut into my steak with more force than necessary. "Sounds like you two had quite the history." "Oh, we did?" Elena said, her eyes never leaving Alex's face. Alex was always the adventurous one. He made everything exciting. The implication hung in the air like smoke. I wasn't adventurous. I wasn't exciting. I was just the husband who paid for dinners like this while she reminisced about better times with better men. "So, Alex," I said, taking a sip of the overpriced wine Elena had ordered, "what brings you back to Portland? Last I heard you were conquering Wall Street." "Hedge fund management," he said with false modesty. "But I miss the simple life. And old friends?" His eyes locked on Elena's. "Some things are worth coming back for." Elena actually blushed. At our dinner table, on New Year's Eve. That's when I noticed how she'd done her makeup. The smoky eyes she usually reserved for special occasions, the red lipstick that made her look like she was ready for a magazine shoot. She'd dressed up for him, not me. "Elena tells me you run a gym," Alex continued, cutting into his Wagyu beef. "That must be fulfilling." The way he said fulfilling made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. "It is," I replied. "There's something honest about physical work. No games, no pretense. Just results." "How refreshing," Alex said, but his tone suggested it was anything but. As the evening wore on, Elena and Alex fell deeper into their private bubble of shared memories and inside jokes. They talked about trips to Europe I'd never taken, restaurants in New York I'd never been to, people I'd never met. I might as well have been invisible. When the dessert course arrived, Elena fed Alex a spoonful of her creme brulee. Actually fed him with her own spoon, the same spoon that had been in her mouth. "This is incredible," Alex moaned, his eyes closing in exaggerated pleasure. "Almost as good as that place in Paris you took me to." She took me to Paris? This was news to me. Elena had always said she'd never been to Europe. "That was such a magical trip," Elena sighed, her hand finding its way back to Alex's arm. "I've never felt so alive." Something cold settled in my stomach. It wasn't just the food sharing or the touching, it was the way she looked at him, like he was everything she'd ever wanted, and I was just the consolation prize she'd settled for. At 11:45, as the restaurant began preparing for their New Year's countdown, Elena excused herself to the ladies' room. Alex immediately leaned forward, his mask of politeness slipping. "Look, Jack, I think we should talk man to man." "About what?" "About Elena, about what's best for her." I set down my wine glass carefully. "And what would that be, Alex?" "She's not happy. She hasn't been for a while. She deserves someone who can give her the life she wants, the life she's meant to have." "And you think that's you?" Alex's smile was all teeth and no warmth. "I know it is. The question is whether you're going to make this difficult or if you're going to step aside gracefully." The audacity was breathtaking. Here was a man who'd been invited into my home, who'd eaten my food and accepted my hospitality, telling me to step aside so he could steal my wife. "That's an interesting proposition," I said, keeping my voice level despite the rage building in my chest. "Elena and I have history, Jack. Real history. What you two have. It's comfortable, but it's not love, not the kind she needs." Elena returned from the bathroom just as the countdown began. She slid back into her seat next to Alex, and as the crowd chanted, 10, 9, 8, she turned to him, not me. At midnight, as fireworks exploded over the harbor and the restaurant erupted in celebration, Elena kissed Alex. Not a friendly peck, but a real kiss. Soft and lingering, the kind of kiss that spoke of promises and possibilities. I stood up slowly, the chair scraping against the floor. Both of them looked at me, Elena's lipstick slightly smudged, Alex's hand still on her waist. "Congratulations," I said, extending my hand to Alex. He took it, confused but pleased with himself. I gripped his hand firmly and looked him straight in the eye. "Consider this my New Year's gift to you. You can deal with her." Then I turned to Elena, who was staring at me with a mixture of shock and defiance. "I don't want a woman like this," I said clearly, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I'm done." I pulled out my wallet, threw down enough cash to cover the entire meal plus tip, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, I could hear Elena calling my name, her voice high and panicked, but I didn't turn around. As I pushed through the restaurant's heavy doors into the cold Maine night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Relief. The weight of trying to save a marriage that was already dead lifted from my shoulders like a physical burden. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Elena, calling again and again. I turned it off and drove home through the empty streets, past the New Year's revelers and the couples kissing under streetlights, feeling more alone than I had in years, but somehow more myself than I'd been in months. The apartment felt different when I walked in that night, colder somehow, despite the heat being on. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and sat in my leather chair, the one piece of furniture Elena had never tried to replace with something more stylish, and tried to process what had just happened. My phone, which I'd turned back on, showed 17 missed calls from Elena and 12 from Alex. I deleted them all without listening and poured another drink. At 2 a.m., Elena came home. I heard her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, heard her pause outside the living room where I sat in the dark. "Jack?" Her voice was small, uncertain. "Can we talk?" I turned on the lamp beside my chair. She stood in the doorway, still wearing that black dress, her makeup smeared, looking like she'd been crying. "What's there to talk about, Elena?" "It's not what you think," I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Really? Because what I think is that my wife invited her ex-boyfriend to our romantic dinner, spent the entire evening flirting with him, and then kissed him at midnight while I sat there like an idiot." "Did I miss something?" She stepped into the room, wrapping her arms around herself. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Tell me, Elena, when exactly did you go to Paris with Alex? Because I could have sworn you told me you'd never been to Europe." Her face went pale. That was a long time ago, before we were married." "When we were engaged?" Silence. "When we were engaged, Elena?" "It was just a weekend trip. It didn't mean anything." "A weekend trip to Paris with your ex-boyfriend while you were engaged to me didn't mean anything?" She sat down on the couch, suddenly looking very tired. "You don't understand. Alex and I, we have this connection. We always have. But I chose you, Jack. I married you." "Lucky me." "Don't be sarcastic. You know what I mean." I stood up, the bourbon making me steadier rather than less so. "No, Elena. I don't know what you mean. Explain it to me. Explain how having a connection with another man while married to me is supposed to make sense. You've changed, Jack. We both have. We're not the same people who got married 5 years ago." "You're right. 5 years ago, I thought I married a woman who respected me enough not to humiliate me in public." "I never meant to humiliate you." "Then what did you mean to do? What was tonight supposed to accomplish?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted to see if I still felt something for him. The honesty of it hit me like a physical blow, not because it was surprising, but because hearing her admit it made it real in a way that watching it happen hadn't. And do you? Another pause. Then, yes. I nodded slowly, setting down my glass. Well, at least we're being honest now. Jack, I don't want to hurt you. Too late for that, don't you think? I walked past her toward the bedroom. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Tomorrow we can figure out the logistics. Logistics? The divorce, Elena. The divorce. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling, listening to Elena cry in our bedroom. By morning, she was gone, and so were 2 suitcases worth of her clothes. The next few days passed in a blur of lawyer consultations and paperwork. Maine was a no-fault divorce state, which meant Elena's infidelity didn't matter legally, but it mattered to me. It mattered a lot. My friend Mick O'Sullivan, who co-owned the gym with me and had 20 years of police work under his belt before retiring, stopped by the apartment on January 3rd with coffee and donuts. You look like hell, he said, settling his bulk into Elena's abandoned spot on the couch. Feel worse than I look. Want to talk about it? I told him everything. The dinner, the kiss, the late-night confession. Mick listened without interrupting, occasionally grunting in disapproval. So she's moved in with this Alex character? Seems like it. She came by yesterday to get more clothes, wouldn't look me in the eye. Mick was quiet for a moment, then, You know, Jack, in my experience, people like that don't just suddenly develop a conscience. This has been going on longer than you think. What do you mean? I mean, she didn't just reconnect with this guy and immediately fall back in love. This has been building for months, maybe longer. The thought had occurred to me, but hearing Mick say it out loud made my stomach clench. You think they were having an affair? I think you should find out. Knowledge is power, especially in a divorce. How? Mick grinned, and for a moment I could see the cop he used to be. Elena ever changed the password on her laptop? She hadn't. Elena was many things, but tech-savvy wasn't one of them. She used the same password for everything, her birthday followed by our wedding anniversary. It took me less than 5 minutes to access her email account. What I found there made the New Year's dinner look like innocent flirtation. The emails went back 8 months. 8 months of increasingly intimate correspondence between Elena and Alex. It started innocently enough, Alex reaching out to reconnect, Elena responding politely, but it quickly escalated. I can't stop thinking about Paris, Alex had written in March. About us. About what we had. Elena's response? I think about it too, more than I should. By June, they were meeting for lunch. By August, the lunches had become dinners. By October, Elena was complaining about me to Alex in explicit detail. Jack doesn't understand me the way you do. He's so focused on that stupid gym, he barely notices I exist. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a stranger. Alex's response was perfectly calculated. You deserve someone who sees how amazing you are. Someone who appreciates what they have. The emails from December made me physically sick. Elena describing our marriage as a mistake, talking about how she'd settled for me because I was safe and stable, but not what she really wanted. I know it's wrong, she'd written to Alex on December 20th, but I can't help how I feel. When I'm with you, I remember who I used to be, who I want to be again. Alex's response, then stop fighting it. Life's too short to be unhappy. You know I'd take care of you. The final email was dated December 30th, the day before our dinner. I'm going to tell him tomorrow night. I can't keep living this lie. I want to be with you, Alex. I want the life we should have had. So the dinner hadn't been about wanting us all to have a nice evening. It had been Elena's way of ending our marriage as publicly and humiliatingly as possible. She'd wanted me to see her with Alex, wanted me to understand that I was being replaced. I printed every email, every text thread I could access, every photo. By the time I was done, I had a stack of papers 3 inches thick documenting my wife's 8-month emotional affair and her complete disrespect for our marriage. Mick whistled low when I showed him the evidence. Jesus, Jack, she really did a number on you. The worst part is how calculated it all was. She didn't just fall for him again. She planned this. She wanted to hurt me. So what are you going to do about it? I looked at the stack of papers, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal laid out in black and white, and felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. I'm going to give her exactly what she deserves. Elena's best friend Tara Morrison had always rubbed me the wrong way. She was the kind of woman who smiled to your face while sharpening knives behind your back, and she'd been Elena's closest confidant since college. If anyone knew the full extent of Elena's affair, it would be Tara. What I didn't expect was to find her name in Elena's email threads. Buried in the correspondence between Elena and Alex were several forwarded messages, emails that Elena had sent to Tara and Tara's responses. Reading them felt like watching a car accident in slow motion. Tara, I need advice. Alex wants me to leave Jack, but I'm scared. What if I'm making a mistake? Tara's response was swift and brutal. Honey, you've been making a mistake for 5 years. Jack is dead weight. He's holding you back from the life you deserve. Alex can give you everything: money, status, excitement. What does Jack give you? A cramped apartment and the smell of sweaty gym clothes. It got worse, much worse. In another exchange from November, Tara had actively encouraged Elena to deceive me. Don't tell Jack about the dinner with Alex. What he doesn't know won't hurt him, and you deserve to explore your feelings. You've been the perfect wife for long enough. It's time to think about what you want. But the email that made my blood boil was from December 15th. I saw Jack at the grocery store today. He looked so pathetic buying frozen dinners and cheap beer. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered how much happier you've been since Alex came back into your life. Jack had his chance to make you happy, and he blew it. You don't owe him anything. Tara hadn't just known about the affair. She'd been its biggest cheerleader. She'd encouraged Elena to lie, to cheat, to humiliate me. She'd been an active participant in the destruction of my marriage. I was still processing this betrayal when my phone rang. It was Luis Vargas, one of the trainers at my gym and probably the most loyal guy I knew. Boss, you need to get down here, he said, his usually cheerful voice tight with anger. What's wrong? Just get down here, now. I found Luis in the gym's office with Mrs. Catherine Callahan, my 70-year-old neighbor who lived in the apartment directly below mine. Mrs. Callahan had the hearing of a woman half her age and the memory of an elephant. She also had no filter whatsoever. Jack, dear, she said, patting my arm with surprising strength. I've been wanting to talk to you about those late-night visitors your wife's been having. My stomach dropped. What visitors? That handsome man in the expensive suits. He's been coming by for months when you're at work. Always leaves before you get home, though. Very sneaky about it. Luis was practically vibrating with rage. Mrs. Callahan saw him there yesterday afternoon, while you were here working. Yesterday? But Elena had moved out. What was Alex doing at my apartment? Mrs. Callahan nodded vigorously. Oh, yes, dear. He had a key and everything. Let himself right in. I thought it was odd, since your wife had already moved out with all those suitcases. A key. Alex had a key to my apartment. Mrs. Callahan, I said carefully, how long has this been going on? Oh, months and months. Since last spring, I'd say. At first, I thought maybe he was a repairman or something, but repairmen don't usually stay for hours at a time, do they? And they certainly don't leave women's undergarments on the fire escape. Luis made a choking sound. What? Oh, yes, Mrs. Callahan continued cheerfully. I found a rather expensive-looking bra hanging from the fire escape outside your bedroom window back in September. Figured the wind must have blown it out there. Returned it to Elena the next day. She was so embarrassed, poor thing. The picture was becoming clearer and more sickening by the minute. Elena and Alex hadn't just been having an emotional affair. They'd been using my apartment for their physical relationship while I was at work. In my bed, in my home. Mrs. Callahan, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, would you be willing to write down everything you've seen? Dates, times, whatever you remember? Of course, dear. I keep a diary, you know, very detailed. I could make you copies of the relevant entries. After Mrs. Callahan left, Luis and I sat in the gym's office staring at each other. Boss, this is messed up, Luis said finally. Yeah, it is. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, Mick walked in carrying a manila folder and wearing the expression of a man who'd seen too much. We need to talk, he said, setting the folder on my desk. All of us. The folder contained photographs, lots of them. I did a little surveillance work, Mick explained. Followed your wife and her boyfriend for a few days. Thought you might want to know what they're up to. The photos showed Elena and Alex at restaurants I couldn't afford, shopping at stores where I'd never set foot, attending events in circles where I'd never be welcome. But it was the final set of photos that hit the hardest. Elena and Alex at a jewelry store looking at engagement rings. This was taken yesterday, Mick said quietly, 2 days after your divorce papers were filed. She's not even divorced yet, and she's shopping for engagement rings? Gets better, Mick said grimly. I did some digging into Alex Sterling. Turns out he's got quite the history with married women. 3 previous relationships, all with women who left their husbands for him. And and he's never married any of them. Once the divorce is final and the novelty wears off, he moves on to the next conquest. Elena's not special, Jack. She's just the latest in a pattern. Luis leaned forward. So, what's the plan, boss? I looked at the photos, at the evidence of Elena's betrayal, at the faces of the two people who'd decided my life was disposable. Something cold and calculating settled in my chest. The plan is to make sure Elena gets exactly what she's asking for. Which is? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. A life without me in it. Permanently. Mick raised an eyebrow. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Elena wants to play games. She wants to humiliate me, destroy my reputation, take everything I've worked for. I stood up, feeling more focused than I had in weeks. So I'm going to let her try. And then I'm going to show her what happens when you underestimate someone you think is beneath you. Boss, Luis said slowly, that sounds kind of ominous. Does it? I gathered up the photos and emails. I prefer to think of it as educational. Elena's about to learn that there's a difference between being nice and being weak. And Alex is going to learn that some men don't just roll over and play dead when you steal their wives. Mick grinned. Now you're talking. What do you need? Information. Lots of it. I want to know everything about Alex Sterling. His business, his finances, his secrets. I want to know about Tara Morrison, too. And I want to know exactly how long this affair has really been going on. Consider it done. As my friends left to begin their research, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the evidence of my wife's betrayal. For the first time since New Year's Eve, I felt like myself again. The hurt was still there, the anger was still burning, but underneath it all was something else. Purpose. Elena thought she was so smart, so sophisticated, so much better than the simple man she'd married. She thought she could discard me like an old piece of furniture and move on to her exciting new life without consequences. She was about to learn how wrong she was. 3 days later, I was ready to make my first move. Mick's research had uncovered some interesting facts about Alex Sterling. Despite his expensive suits and luxury car, his hedge fund was struggling. He'd lost several major clients in the past year, and his personal finances were shakier than they appeared. More importantly, he was engaged. Not to Elena, to a woman named Victoria Ashford, daughter of one of Boston's oldest banking families. The engagement had been announced in the society pages 6 months ago, right around the time Alex had started his email correspondence with my wife. Elena didn't know about Victoria. I was sure of that, because if she had, it would have been mentioned in her emails. Alex was playing both women, keeping Elena as his side piece while maintaining his engagement to a woman who could advance his career. I decided to start with Alex. I found him in the parking garage beneath his downtown office building at 6 p.m. on a Thursday. He was walking toward his silver BMW, talking loudly on his phone about quarterly projections and client portfolios. He looked every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and Italian leather shoes. "Alex," I called out, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. He turned, surprised. When he saw me, his expression shifted from confusion to wariness. "Jack, what are you doing here? Thought we should have that man-to-man conversation you mentioned at dinner?" Alex glanced around the empty garage, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, if this is about Elena..." "Oh, it's definitely about Elena, among other things." I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos Mick had taken of him and Elena at the jewelry store. "Nice ring shopping, very romantic. Does Victoria know you're planning to propose to someone else?" The color drained from Alex's face. "How do you know about your fiancé? I make it my business to know about people who screw with my life." I stepped closer, close enough that he had to crane his neck to look up at me. "The question is, does Elena know about Victoria?" That's complicated." "Is it?" "Because it seems pretty simple to me. You're engaged to one woman while having an affair with another. Most people have a word for that." Alex's composure cracked. "You don't understand. Victoria and I, it's a business arrangement. Our families, save it for someone who cares." I grabbed the front of his expensive suit jacket and slammed him against his car. "You want to know what's not complicated? This. You stay away from Elena. You end whatever this is between you two, and you disappear from our lives." "You can't threaten me," Alex stammered, but his voice shook. "I'm not threatening you. I'm promising you." I leaned in closer, letting him smell the gym sweat and honest work on my clothes. "You think because you wear expensive suits and drive a fancy car that you're better than me? You think I'm just some dumb musclehead who'll roll over and let you steal his wife?" I pulled out my keys and slowly, deliberately, dragged them along the side of his BMW, leaving a deep scratch in the pristine paint. That's for starters, I said calmly. Next time, it won't just be your car. Alex's hands were shaking as he fumbled for his phone. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. Tell them you're being harassed by the husband of the woman you're having an affair with. I'm sure that'll go over great with Victoria's family when it hits the papers. He lowered the phone. Smart choice. I stepped back, giving him room to breathe. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Elena tonight and tell her it's over. You're going to tell her you made a mistake, that you can't leave Victoria, whatever story you want to spin. But you're going to end it. And if I don't, I smiled. Then I start making phone calls to Victoria, to her family, to your business partners, to everyone who thinks you're a respectable businessman instead of a lying, cheating piece of garbage who preys on married women. I turned to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Alex, if I find out you've been in my apartment again, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation. I left him standing there in the garage, shaking and staring at the scratch on his car. It felt good. Better than good. For months, I'd been the victim in this situation, the wronged husband who was supposed to suffer in silence while his wife found happiness with someone else. Not anymore. My phone rang as I was driving home. Elena. Jack, what did you do? Hello to you too, Elena. Alex just called me. He's hysterical. He said you attacked him. I laughed. Attacked him? Elena, I had a conversation with him. If he feels attacked by that, maybe he's not as tough as he pretends to be. You can't do this, Jack. You can't intimidate him. Can't I? Seems like I just did. There was a pause. When Elena spoke again, her voice was cold. You're making a mistake. Alex isn't someone you want as an enemy. Neither am I, Elena. Something you should have considered before you decided to humiliate me in public. I never meant... Yes, you did. You meant every bit of it. The dinner, the kiss, all of it. You wanted to hurt me, to show me how easily I could be replaced. Well, congratulations. Mission accomplished. Jack, please, can we just talk about this like adults? Adults don't have affairs, Elena. Adults don't lie to their spouses for 8 months. Adults don't use their husband's apartment to screw their ex-boyfriend while he's at work. Silence. That's right. I know about that too. I know about all of it. The emails, the meetings, the lies. I know about Tara's involvement. I know about everything. How? Does it matter? The point is, you're not as clever as you think you are, and neither is Alex. What do you want, Jack? It was a good question. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said I wanted my wife back, wanted to save our marriage, wanted things to go back to the way they were. But sitting there in my car, listening to Elena's voice with no trace of remorse or regret, I realized that wasn't what I wanted at all. I want you to be happy, Elena. I want you to have exactly the life you've chosen. All of it. The good parts and the bad parts. The excitement and the consequences. What does that mean? It means you made your choice on New Year's Eve. Now live with it. I hung up and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in months. The first phase of my plan was complete. I'd rattled Alex, shown him that I wasn't going to be the passive victim he'd expected. I'd let Elena know that her secrets weren't as safe as she thought. But this was just the beginning. Elena wanted a new life. She was going to get one. Just not the one she was expecting. When I got home, I found Mrs. Callahan waiting in the hallway with a thick manila envelope. Those diary entries you wanted, dear, she said with a conspiratorial wink. Very thorough documentation, dates, times, descriptions. I even included some photographs. Photographs? Oh yes. I started taking pictures when I realized what was going on. Evidence, you know. My late husband was a lawyer. He always said documentation was everything. I opened the envelope and nearly choked. Mrs. Callahan had been busy. The photos showed Alex entering and leaving my building, Elena letting him in, the two of them on my fire escape, and several shots of them through my bedroom window. Mrs. Callahan, how did you... telephoto lens, dear. My grandson gave it to me for birdwatching, but it works just as well for other kinds of surveillance. I stared at the evidence in my hands. With Mrs. Callahan's documentation, I had a complete record of Elena's affair. Dates, times, photographic evidence. Everything I needed to destroy her credibility in the divorce proceedings. But more than that, I had ammunition for something bigger. Mrs. Callahan, would you be willing to testify about what you've seen? Of course, dear. I've been waiting 60 years for something this exciting to happen in the building. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I felt the pieces of my plan clicking into place. Elena thought she was so smart, so sophisticated. She thought she could outmaneuver the simple gym owner she'd married. She was about to learn that intelligence and education weren't the same thing as wisdom, and wisdom was knowing that when you declare war on someone, you better make sure you can win it. The war was just getting started. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was having coffee in my kitchen when someone knocked on my door. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a way that screamed old money. "Mr. Landon, my name is Victoria Ashford. I believe we need to talk." Alex's fiancée. This was interesting. I opened the door and gestured her inside. Up close, Victoria Ashford was even more impressive. She moved with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world, but there was something sharp and calculating in her blue eyes. "Ms. Ashford, this is unexpected." "I imagine it is." She looked around my apartment with the appraising gaze of someone used to evaluating real estate. "I understand you've recently had some interactions with my fiancé. If by interactions you mean I told him to stay away from my wife, then yes. Your soon-to-be ex-wife, from what I understand." I poured her a cup of coffee without asking if she wanted it. "What can I do for you, Ms. Ashford?" "You can help me destroy him." That got my attention. "Excuse me?" Victoria sat down at my kitchen table and crossed her legs with practiced elegance. "Alex Sterling is a lying, cheating, manipulative bastard who thinks he can play games with people's lives. He's been using me for my family's connections while carrying on an affair with your wife. I want him gone from both our lives." "How did you find out?" "I hired a private investigator months ago. I'm not stupid, Mr. Landon. I knew Alex was seeing someone else. I just didn't know who until recently." She opened her purse and pulled out a folder that made mixed surveillance photos look amateur. This was professional-grade documentation: financial records, hotel receipts, credit card statements, photographs taken with equipment that cost more than my car. "Alex has been using my family's money to fund his relationship with your wife. The jewelry shopping, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips, all paid for with funds from accounts my father set up for our wedding expenses." I whistled low. That's got to sting. What stings is the assumption that I'm too naive to notice. Alex thinks because I come from money and was raised to be a proper society wife, I'm also stupid. He's about to learn otherwise. "What do you want from me?" Victoria leaned forward, and I saw steel beneath the polished exterior. "I want to coordinate our efforts. You want revenge on your wife for humiliating you. I want revenge on Alex for stealing from my family and making a fool of me. Together, we can destroy both of them." "What did you have in mind?" "Alex is throwing a party this weekend, a networking event for potential clients, trying to drum up business for his failing hedge fund. Your wife will be there as his date, playing the role of his devoted girlfriend. It's being held at the country club where my family has been members for 3 generations. And I'm going to attend with some very interesting documentation about Alex's business practices and personal character. But it would be much more effective if the wronged husband showed up as well." I considered this. The old Jack would have said no, would have wanted to handle things quietly, privately, with dignity, but the old Jack had gotten him a cheating wife and a public humiliation. "What exactly are you proposing?" Victoria smiled, and it was predatory. "I'm proposing we give them the public scene they've been so careful to avoid. Alex has been telling people that your wife is a client, that their relationship is purely professional. Your wife has been telling people that you're an abusive husband who drove her away. Time to set the record straight." "You want to confront them in front of his potential clients?" "I want to destroy his reputation and her credibility in one fell swoop. By the time we're done, Alex will lose what's left of his business, and your wife will be exposed as exactly what she is: a cheating opportunist who destroyed her marriage for a man who was using her." It was tempting, very tempting. What's the catch? No catch. I get my revenge on Alex, you get yours on your wife, and they both get exactly what they deserve. I thought about Elena, about the way she'd looked at Alex that night at the restaurant, about the months of lies and deception. I thought about Alex's smug assumption that I'd just roll over and accept being replaced. When and where? Victoria's smile widened. "Saturday night, 7 o'clock, the Pemberton Country Club, cocktails and networking for Portland's finest financial professionals." I'm not exactly country club material. You don't need to be. You just need to be the wronged husband with evidence of his wife's affair and her boyfriend's financial improprieties. After Victoria left, I called Mick and Luis to fill them in on this new development. "Boss," Luis said, "this sounds like a setup." "Maybe, but if it is, it's a setup that works in my favor." Mick was more thoughtful. "This Victoria woman, she's playing a deeper game than just revenge. Women like her don't just want to hurt people, they want to control the narrative." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she's not just going to destroy Alex, she's going to position herself as the innocent victim while making sure everyone knows she's available and wealthy. This is about more than revenge. It's about reputation management. So be careful. Women like that are dangerous allies. They're useful until they're not. But I was past caring about being careful. Elena and Alex had made their choices. They'd decided I was disposable, that my feelings didn't matter, that they could humiliate me without consequences. Saturday night, they were going to learn otherwise. I spent the next 2 days preparing. I bought a suit, not as expensive as Alex's, but respectable. I organized all my documentation into a presentation folder. I practiced what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, and what I was going to do when Elena inevitably tried to turn the situation around on me. Most importantly, I prepared myself mentally for what I was about to do. This wasn't going to be a private confrontation or a quiet conversation. This was going to be public, messy, and devastating. There would be no going back after this. But as I looked at the photos of Elena and Alex shopping for engagement rings while she was still married to me, I realized there was already no going back. They'd made sure of that on New Year's Eve. Saturday night couldn't come fast enough. The Pemberton Country Club looked exactly like what it was. Old money trying to pretend it was older than it actually was. Built in the 1920s by railroad barons who wanted to create their own version of East Coast aristocracy, it sat on a hill overlooking Casco Bay, all white columns and manicured lawns. I felt like an imposter walking through the front doors in my off-the-rack suit, but I reminded myself that I belonged here as much as anyone else. More than Alex, certainly, who was a fraud pretending to be successful while stealing from his fiancé's family. The cocktail reception was in full swing when I arrived. Portland's financial elite mingled with drinks and appetizers, discussing market trends and investment opportunities. I spotted Alex immediately. He was holding court near the bar, gesturing expansively while a small group of potential clients hung on his every word. Elena stood beside him in a red dress I'd never seen before, playing the role of the sophisticated girlfriend. She was laughing at something Alex had said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. Victoria appeared at my elbow as if by magic. They make quite the couple, don't they? They deserve each other. Indeed they do. Are you ready for this? I patted the folder under my arm. More than ready. Remember, let me go first. I'll draw their attention, and then you can make your entrance. Victoria glided across the room like a shark cutting through water. I watched as she approached Alex's group, saw his face go white when he spotted her. Alex, darling, Victoria's voice carried across the room, pitched just loud enough to draw attention without seeming like she was shouting. What a surprise to see you here, and with a date, no less. The group around Alex shifted uncomfortably. Elena looked confused, clearly not recognizing Victoria but sensing trouble. Victoria? Alex stammered. I wasn't expecting you. I'm sure you weren't. Gentlemen, Victoria addressed the potential clients with a brilliant smile. I don't believe you've met Alex's fiancé. Oh wait, that would be me. This must be his... What would you call yourself, dear? Elena's face went through several shades of pale. Fiancé? Oh yes, Victoria continued conversationally. Alex and I have been engaged for 8 months. The wedding is planned for June. Or was, before I discovered he'd been embezzling from my family's accounts to fund his extramarital activities. The word embezzling hit the group like a bomb. These were financial professionals. The suggestion of financial impropriety was career suicide. Now wait just a minute, Alex started. But Victoria wasn't finished. I have bank records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, all very thorough documentation of Alex's creative accounting practices. That was my cue. I stepped forward, folder in hand. Speaking of documentation, I said loudly enough for the entire room to hear, I have some interesting materials myself. All eyes turned to me. Elena's face went from pale to green when she saw me. Jack, she whispered, what are you doing here? Thought I'd attend a networking event, learn about investment opportunities, maybe share some information about business ethics and personal character. I opened my folder and pulled out one of Mrs. Callahan's photographs, a crystal-clear shot of Alex entering my building. This is my apartment building, I announced to the room, and this is Alex Sterling entering it on November 15th at 2 p.m. while I was at work. Would you like to see him leaving 3 hours later? The crowd was growing as other party guests drifted over to witness the spectacle. That's not what it looks like, Elena said desperately. Really? Because I have about 50 more photos just like it, plus email correspondence between you and Alex dating back 8 months, plus testimony from witnesses who observed your affair. I pulled out more photos, spreading them on a nearby table like a poker player revealing a winning hand. Here's you and Alex shopping for engagement rings on January 2nd, 2 days after you kissed him in front of me at our New Year's dinner, 1 day after our divorce papers were filed. A murmur went through the crowd. In a city like Portland, everyone knew everyone else's business. This would be front-page gossip by morning. "Jack, please," Elena begged. "Don't do this." "Don't do what? Tell the truth? Share the facts? You wanted a public relationship with Alex. Here it is. Public." Alex tried to salvage the situation. "Everyone, this is just a misunderstanding." "Is it?" Victoria interjected smoothly. "Because I have documentation showing you've spent over $40,000 of my family's money on this relationship. $40,000 that was meant for our wedding expenses." One of the potential clients, a distinguished man in his 60s, stepped forward. "Alex, is this true?" "It's complicated." "It's embezzlement," Victoria said flatly, "and adultery, and fraud." I pulled out the final piece of evidence, a copy of Elena's email to Tara describing our marriage as a mistake, and me as someone she'd settled for. "This is what my wife really thinks of me," I said, reading from the email. "Jack is so focused on that stupid gym, he barely notices I exist. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a stranger." Elena broke down, but you didn't buy the out-of-context excuse. You had months of emails, photos, and proof that she and Alex used your home and planned your humiliation. In front of everyone, you named Alex for what he was, two-timing, stealing, and playing games with people's lives, then exposed Elena as a liar who chose betrayal every day for 8 months. The room turned on them instantly because reputation is currency, and you just set theirs on fire. Victoria finished the kill shot with lawyers and regulators, and when Elena chased you outside begging to work it out, you drew the line. This wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern of choices, and the only regret was getting caught. You left the country club into the cold night with the city already buzzing, not gloating, just finally calm, because the truth was public, the mask was gone, and the consequences were no longer yours to carry.